In the late 1960s, the small town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, became the epicenter of one of America's strangest mysteries. Between November of 1966 and December of 1967, dozens of local residents reported seeing a creature unlike anything that they had ever encountered. It was described as standing between 6 and 7 feet tall, with enormous bat-like wings folded against its back, and 2 burning red eyes that seemed to peer straight through the dark. Some said it flew silently overhead. Others said it chased their cars at speeds over 100 miles per hour. Still, others claimed it simply stood and watched. The creature would become known as Mothman, and whether he was a harbinger of disaster or something much worse, it remains a mystery. In December 1967, just 1 year after the first sightings, the Silver Bridge connecting Point Pleasant to Ohio collapsed during rush hour, killing 46 people. Many believe the sightings stopped after the disaster, but the truth? Mothman never left. He simply learned how to hide. What you're about to hear are 4 Mothman encounter stories. 4 moments where the ordinary world ripped open and something else stepped through. So grab your favorite story watching blanket, your favorite beverage, and maybe some sweet, and don't forget the salty snacks. And you might not want to turn off the lights. I never planned on telling this story, not because I'm worried that you will think I'm lying. That part doesn't even bother me anymore. It's because every time that I try to talk about it, something strange happens. Lights begin to flicker and electronics glitch, and I start to feel like I'm being watched again. You ever get that feeling of having cold chills when you bring a certain scary event back up? But lately I've been having these dreams, the same one, over and over, and they always end the same way. I wake up gasping, heart racing, and the smell of pine and wet earth in my nose, like I'm back there. It happened in late summer of 2004. I had just turned 24. A few buddies and I, Jason, Mark, Ben, we decided to do one last camping trip before the summer ended. We didn't want to hit the usual spots, campgrounds or family-friendly lakes. We wanted somewhere off-grid, like the kind of place that your phone loses signal 10 minutes away, and nobody could find you, even if they tried. Now that was camping. We finally found this spot, or maybe it found us. We picked an area about 10 miles north of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Public use land, nothing fancy. Just some old trails, marshes, woods, thick enough to get lost in if you weren't careful. We'd heard the stories, of course, the old TNT bunkers, Mothman, all that. But honestly, we didn't care about that stuff. It was just background noise, a weird tourist thing. We just wanted a quick spot to drink and hike and not think about work for a couple days. We got there just before dusk, pulled into a gravel clearing that looked like it hadn't even been used in a while. The air suddenly felt thicker there, like breathing through a wet cloth. You could really smell the earth, heavy, rich. We hiked about a mile down an old trail and found a clearing tucked between some trees, with a marsh opening up maybe about 30 yards away, and it looked perfect. So we set up camp there, in 2 small tents, a fire pit in the center. No, nothing fancy, and Jason hung a tarp in case it rained. The first night was actually normal. The fire crackled, the bugs buzzed. The air was filled with that deep, nighttime symphony that you only hear way out there, away from civilization. We drank and we laughed. We passed around stories that we had told 100 times before. At around midnight, night, we all turned in, and the forest swallowed us whole. But I woke up maybe around 3 a.m., and something just felt off. There was no sounds, no dreams, just awake. I laid there just staring at the dark fabric of my tent, waiting. Outside, the woods were silent, not quiet, silent. No crickets, no frogs, not even the wind. If you've ever been deep in the woods, you know how wrong that is. Nature doesn't shut off, not unless something bigger moves in. I tried not to move and tried not to breathe. I just laid there, feeling like something was right there watching me. At some point, I guess I must have drifted back to sleep. I don't even remember how. I think exhaustion just finally took over. In the morning, we didn't really talk about it, but I wasn't the only one. At breakfast, Jason mentioned that he had a nightmare about something standing over him. Mark swore he heard breathing outside the tents. Ben, he just laughed it off. We spent the day hiking, checking out the old bunkers. They're still there. Massive concrete domes half-eaten by moss and vines. Inside, cold, damp, like the place is holding its breath. Jason went inside one alone on a dare. Came back out smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. I remember that. That night, everything changed. We were sitting around the fire again, passing the bottle, swapping dumb stories. And then, just like the night before, the woods, they went dead. It wasn't subtle. It was like someone threw a blanket over the world. Jason noticed it first. He stopped mid-sentence and just froze, staring past the fire toward the marsh. We all turned to see what he was looking at. And at first, nothing. Just the flat black of the swamp under the stars. But then, it moved. At first I thought it was a person. Tall, wide, and gliding, not walking, not flying. Just skimming across the surface of the water, like it didn't weigh anything at all. It made no noise. It reached the far tree line, and without slowing, it grabbed a thick branch overhead. The branch bowed hard under the weight, and that's when we saw the eyes. Red, not reflecting, but glowing, like the last bite of a campfire log. It stared at us, not in a way that animals do. Animals are curious, but this thing was assessing, judging. And I think we were all in shock. We just sat there. Ben finally whispered something, but I didn't catch it. Then Jason stood up real slowly and said, "We need to go." The thing moved, not away, not toward us. It just launched straight into the air with a violent shove. The wings, you could feel them beat the air, deep, low. A sound you don't just hear, you feel it in your bones. It passed over us once, silent, except for the sound of the air breaking around it, like a shadow, darker than the night itself. We didn't wait, we didn't think, we just ran. Jason led the way, flashlight bouncing wildly off the trees. Mark slipped once, he went down hard, but he got back up without a word. I still remember the sound of my own breath, harsh, ugly, and too loud. We could feel it chasing us, following us, watching, and keeping pace. When we finally reached the truck, we all piled in and quickly locked the doors. Jason didn't even turn the key right away. He just sat there, listening. Nothing came out of the woods. Eventually, after what felt like forever and nothing, Jason finally started the engine, and we tore out of there. Gravel was spitting behind us, and The headlights were carving wild shapes through the trees. We didn't talk for a long time, and when we finally did, it wasn't about what we saw. It was about how it made us feel. Scared, small, vulnerable. Like we stepped into something ancient, something that had been there long before us and would be there long after we were gone. I haven't been back since. I'll never go back. None of us have. Every time I think about it, I still wonder, were we lucky? Did we get lucky? Or did it just let us go? Was it just playing with us? Whatever it was, I'm telling you, it wasn't a bird. It wasn't a trick of the light. And it wasn't a story. It was real. And it saw us first.
I've done solo camping trips for years. Forests, deserts, backcountry, you name it. But this time, I thought I'd treat myself. Not to a hotel, but something halfway between survivalist and soft living. So I parked my truck on a Bureau of Land Management site, just outside the Point Pleasant forests. That turned out to be a big mistake. I'd been hearing stories about the area for years. Mothman sightings, weird lights, the collapse of the Silver Bridge. I didn't go there because of the stories. I went there because I wanted quiet, nature. I figured it was just another patch of beautiful, misunderstood forest. So I rolled up with my truck around 5:30 p.m. The sun began dipping low behind the trees. BLM land, totally legal to camp, totally remote. My rig's a built-out pickup, comfy bed in the back, blackout shades, enough room to stretch out and chill with a thermos of coffee while listening to an audiobook. The first hour or two was normal. Birds, distant rustling, breeze filtering through the tall trees. But around 9 p.m., it changed. The crickets stopped. I know that sounds cliche, but when you spend enough time camping, silence becomes a sound, a wrong sound, a kind of pressure, like something invisible is breathing just outside your field of vision. I stepped out of the truck to pee, and the air felt thick, not cold, not warm, just charged. As I was going to relieve myself behind the trees, that's when I heard it. A low, metallic hum. Not from the trees, but higher, from above. It wasn't a helicopter, no blades, no rotor wash. This was deeper. I spun around, scanning the treetops with my flashlight. Nothing. Until I angled it up. And there it was. Just above the canopy, barely visible, was a figure. Large. It looked like it had wings tucked behind its back. The eyes, those eyes glowed a deep, burning red. No reflection. They were lit from within, like two coals, watching me. It silently observed me for, I say, was 8 seconds before my body dumped all of the adrenaline I had reserved. Fight or flight kicked in, and it was certainly not there with peaceful intentions. So I booked it to the truck, opened the door, slammed the key in the ignition, and hightailed it back to the service road. I probably drove a quarter mile out from the main road, and as I began to make a straightaway, to my absolute horror, I got flashed by the eerie red glowing lights from the same creature I saw before. I let rip a bunch of words my wife would hate, all in one go. I gunned the engine and hit 60 miles per hour. The creature was now right next to my truck. I could hear the damn thing clearly. This high-pitched chirping noise with a screech to it. It was disorienting every time I heard it make that noise. I pushed harder and hit 80 miles per hour. The creature kept up. Now I was on a service road, not even the main one leading out of the forest. One wrong move and it would be all over for me. A mile out from the forest edge, I finally reached the main road heading toward Point Pleasant. As soon as I hit the pavement, it stopped pursuit. The shadow of the creature that was once behind me was no longer there. I looked in the mirror. Nothing. Whatever it was, it didn't leave. It retreated. Back into the forest, like that was where it belonged. Like it only wanted me to know that it was real. Growing up in West Virginia, you always hear stories of the Appalachian wilderness and how haunted it is. Bigfoots, unknown monsters, all commingling up there for all I know. I never believed in those stories. Sure, they were entertaining, but no way they were real. But something my dad always told me that stuck with me. Even if you don't believe in them, respect them. That I did not. With the Mothman, I came into it a skeptic. But now, I am not so sure. Maybe what I saw was a glimpse of what he actually could be. I don't know. What I do know is that something unnaturally big chased me down that service road that night. And whatever that creature was, I certainly have respect for it now.
I've never been the type to scare easy. I've always been the kind of person who needed to see something before I would believe in it. I guess you could say it takes a lot to rattle me, even more to make me believe in something like the boogeyman. I grew up around the woods, fields, old barns, places that creak and groan and whisper at night. I learned early that most things that spook you out there have a real explanation. A bobcat screaming sounds like a woman getting murdered. You might hear a loose shutter or a fox scream, or a branch snapping in the wind. Branches rubbing together in the wind can sound like voices. Your own breathing can turn into someone else's if you're out there long enough and you start losing your head. I knew all that. I trusted it. And I still do. Most of the time. But there's a piece of woods out in West Virginia, a little ways outside of Point Pleasant, where something happened that I still can't explain. And believe me, I've tried. It was November, deer season, 15, maybe 16 years ago now. Some buddies of mine had gotten access to private land. Belonged to a distant cousin of one of them. The guy had about 300 acres of rough hills and second growth woods. Hadn't been logged heavy since the 70s, so there were still a lot of old trees, thick cover, good habitat. It was the perfect hunting land. Nobody out there but us. We set up camp at the base of a hill, not far from a narrow creek that wound its way through the property. The kind of creek that freezes thin overnight, but still talks to you all day, bubbling under the ice. There was a little clearing there, just wide enough for 2 big tents, a fire pit, and a row of coolers and gear lined up along the bank. We had a pop-up blind and a few old tree stands that we'd hauled in. Even a little battery radio that barely picked up anything but static after sunset. But it didn't matter. It was the kind of place that you go to unplug. The first night was good. Cold. Real cold. The kind that bites through your boots if you stand too long. But clear. And the stars? They looked close enough to touch. You could hear the owls out across the fields. Coyotes now and then. Otherwise, just the usual night noises that you come to expect in the woods. The next morning, we split up early, before dawn. Still dark enough you needed a headlamp to find your boots. The plan was simple. Fan out, cover different parts of the property. Meet back at the camp by noon, or sooner if someone tagged out early. I took the farthest stand. Nobody else really wanted it. It was the highest point, up near the old Firebreak Trail. A good mile from camp if you cut straight, longer if you stuck to the creek beds. The stand itself was old, but solid. A big oak had grown around part of it, half swallowing the bottom rung of the ladder. Climbing it was tricky in the frost, but once you were up there, you could see across the gully to the next ridge. It was a good spot. One of those places you just sit and you just know if a buck is moving through, this is where he'll show up. I got settled just before first light, pulled my hat down, tucked my gloves tighter, and thumbed the safety on my rifle a few times out of habit. Then I waited. It didn't take long to notice that something was off. You'd expect it to be quiet early, sure, but this was different. It was peaceful. It was hollow. No squirrels were chattering, no woodpeckers tapping. Even the creek noise from down the hill sounded like it was muted under a pillow. I figured maybe the weather was changing. Animals can feel a front coming before we can. They go still. But there was no smell of snow, no pressure change they usually feel in your sinuses when a storm's coming. It just felt empty. An hour passed. Nothing moved. The sun came up slow behind a curtain of thin clouds, washing everything out in this flat, colorless light. I kept glassing the tree lines, the trails, the game runs that I'd scouted the day before. Nothing. Another hour. Still nothing. I started getting that itchy feeling, that sense that you're not alone. Every hunter knows it. Sometimes it's just a fox creeping in. Sometimes it's just your own mind messing with you. But this didn't feel like either. It felt heavy, like something was waiting just out of sight. And that's when I heard it. Low, slow, a heavy, rhythmic thwomp that I felt through the soles of my boots before I actually even heard it. I looked up, expecting maybe a big old turkey flying in or an eagle passing overhead, but the sky was empty. The sound wasn't above me. It was coming from across the gully, from the trees. I raised my binoculars, panning slow, scanning the ridgeline, and that's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a stump, something black, tall, half hidden behind a clump of cedars. But it was too tall, too narrow, and it moved. Not a lot, just enough. A slow shifting of weight, like something getting ready to step forward, but thinking better of it. Then the eyes caught me. 2 red dots. Not reflective like a deer in the spotlight, but lit from within, like coals left too long in a dead fire. Focused. Locked onto me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe right. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was something even deeper. Like every part of me knew. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't supposed to be there. It wasn't part of the world that I knew. And suddenly it just unfolded itself. That's the best way that I can describe it. Like it had been crouched, hunched down low, and now it was just standing tall. And behind it, massive wings, and unfurled slowly. Not feathers, more like leather. The wings flexed, they flexed, and that same heavy whoop of air shook the cedars around it. It took one step toward the gully, then another, smooth, unhurried, like it wasn't worried about anything catching it, like it had all the time in the world. I finally found my legs, slid down that stand faster than was probably safe, rifle bouncing off my shoulder, boots barely catching rungs. When I hit the ground, I didn't look back. I didn't aim. I didn't think. I just ran. Full sprint, straight down the gully, straight through the creek, soaking my boots in ice water. I couldn't even feel it. The branches whipping my face, the thorns tearing at my sleeves. I didn't care. I just ran. The whole way back to camp, I expected to hear wings over me, to feel claws grabbing my back. But nothing came. The woods stayed dead silent the whole way. When I finally stumbled into camp, the others were sitting around the fire, joking, drinking burnt coffee out of tin mugs. They looked up at me, saw me dripping wet and gasping, and started laughing, asked if I had fallen in. Said maybe I had tangled with a bear. All good-natured. They didn't know. And I didn't tell them, not then, not for a long time. Because even now, sitting here telling you this, I don't know what it was. I don't know what I saw out there. But it wasn't a man. It wasn't a deer. And it wasn't something that belonged in those woods. I heard later, after the season ended, that some locals had been seeing strange things around the area again. Weird lights, animals disappearing. Some even said that there had been mutilated deer found, half eaten, scattered like a buzzard had picked on them way too clean and too fast. One old guy, a Vietnam vet, tough as nails, swore that he saw something bigger than a man land on the roof of his shed one night. Said the whole structure groaned under its weight, and said he stayed locked inside till dawn, clutching a .45 that he knew wouldn't have done a damn thing if it had even wanted to come through. I believe him. I believe every word, because once you do see it, once you know there's things out there that don't fit into the world that you thought you understood, you don't ever really forget it. You don't feel safe in the woods again, not the way you used to. You still go, maybe not to those part of the woods, but you still go. You still listen harder and move faster. You leave the second the birds stop singing. Because sometimes when the woods go quiet, it's not the weather. It's not a storm. It's something else. Something watching, waiting. And you don't want to be the one standing there when it decides to step into the light. For more than 50 years, Point Pleasant has lived in the long shadows of the Mothman. Some say he was a warning. Some say he was the cause. Others believe he's still there, hiding in the mist, waiting for the next disaster.
My name's John. I work air traffic control out of Yeager Airport here in West Virginia. It's not a job that leaves much room for imagination. You don't guess, you don't hope, you confirm. But after what happened to me last October, I'm not so sure the world works like I thought it did. I was finishing up a night shift. Weather delays, pilot radio complaints, endless coordination with tower and ground. I was fried. Just a wall of numbers and voices in my ears for 6 hours straight. You get to a point where you start to feel like you're not even inside your own body anymore. It was close to 2:15 in the morning when I stepped outside the terminal. The parking lot was empty, cold wind, orange halogen lights buzzing like they always do. At this point, I couldn't wait for a hot meal and a kiss from my wife at home. At least I know what makes me enjoy life a little more. Anyway, I began making my way to my car, and that's when I saw it. Just beyond my car, maybe 3 rows down, perched near a utility pole, was something. Tall, black, hunched. It almost looked like a large bird, but heavier, bulkier. And those eyes, I swear they weren't reflecting light. They were emitting it. Deep, unwavering red, piercing right through me. I blinked. Gone. Just vanished. And here's the thing. I didn't react. My brain just filed it under exhaustion. A shadow. The trick of the light. My shift was hell, my eyes were dry, and I wanted to get home. So I got in my car and started driving. The roads here in West Virginia, if you know them, you know they don't make sense sometimes. They wind and dip and curve like the land doesn't want to be tamed. And at night, they become pitch black, especially the stretch between the airport and my home in the outskirts. About 15 minutes in, I took that back route through a forested ridge. I've driven it hundreds of times. No houses, no lights, just my high beams and the occasional deer that'll ruin your bumper if you're not paying attention. But not that night. The woods felt alive. Then I saw it again. Mid-curve, there was a flash of movement above me. Fast, deliberate. Something massive glided overhead, just outside the reach of my headlights. This thing flapped once and disappeared into the trees on the other side of the road. I slowed down. My instincts were screaming to go home, but I couldn't help it. I scanned the tree line. Nothing. Then I saw it in my rearview mirror. Red eyes, no face, no head, just two eyes in midair, staring through the back window, keeping perfect pace with me. I hit the gas, 80, then 90, my knuckles white on the wheel. Every hair on my body was standing up. I wasn't driving anymore. I was fleeing, and the thing, it kept my pace like it was nothing. The road finally broke out of the forest and opened toward town. Street lights were in the distance, signs of life. And just like that, it was gone for good. The air cleared, and I was alone again. I pulled over, stepped out of the car, and found a small bush to throw up in. What was this thing doing, chasing me? The anxiety was real and made me feel extremely nauseous. I caught my breath finally, and threw up one last time. I got my composure and scanned the trees around me. No red eyes, no silhouette, just the sound of my engine ticking down. I never believed in myths, legends, all the ghost stories that we grew up as kids. I knew not to be true. But what I saw that night made me reevaluate my stance on the supernatural indefinitely.